Right. Hello, greetings. So welcome. This is our New Year's Eve Philosophy Club here in La Creuse in the middle of France. We've had a lovely Christmas celebration. It's a bit sad, the continuing wars going on in the world. Ukraine and Russia, still not resolved. Russia unleashing huge barrages against Ukraine. Ukraine fighting back. I mean, when will it end? What is it that we can do instead of this repeating war cycle? With all due respect, I thought we finished that at the end of World War II in Europe. We had enough of war. I'm from the generation that my parents lived through the war. They met in World War II in London during the Blitz, and they said never again will Europe go to war. That's why they supported the European Union, the Council of Europe. Why my mother helped design European studies as an academic subject for British schools. She was a lover of French literature. She spoke fluent French. She loved Italy, Greece. You know, she was a Europhile. And she said, no, we'll be one continent living in peace now forever. And that's still my mission. I'm appalled that we're now having wars in Europe. Tragic. Just like in World War II. It's got to stop. So that's why I'm invoking the wisdom of the sages of the ages here in the Philosophy Club to try and bring wisdom instead of cruelty, hatred and fear, which all comes out of ignorance. I'm a Platonist philosophically, and Plato said there's no real evil, there's just ignorance. Ignorance is what causes suffering. And ignorance in English, the sound is to ignore something. We know what we should be doing. Like, there should have been education exchanges between all the different European countries, even more than there have been. The British should have been more appreciative of their European neighbours. I like France because as a child I used to come here on educational visits and I learned French and I love France. It's like my other home, and it is my home now. And if the Ukrainians and Russians had been doing that, learning about each other's cultures, Ukrainians are proudly different but similar to Russians, but they have their own history, and Russians often don't realise that. They think, oh, they're just Russians causing trouble. No, they're not. They have their own history, Ukraine. And likewise, the Russians have their own unique history. So more educational exchanges could have been done. More academic and intellectual exchanges at the highest level between scientists, scholars, philosophers. That would have prevented these wars happening. And likewise the same with Israel and Gaza and Palestine. I have friends on all sides of that conflict. I have Israeli friends, Palestinian friends from Gaza and from the West Bank, and I've met, many of them. If we'd have had more support to do educational work across the cultural boundaries and across the religious boundaries between people that look to the Jewish Bible as the sole last definitive word of God, and those who look to the Quran and say, no, there's been an update. Muhammad was in that prophetic lineage. And those who look to the New Testament of the Christians and say, no, there's been an update there too. So I've been working as a scholar to try to bridge this and say, well, let's look at them all and ask what is the spirituality underlying them all? Where can we make a unity of them all? Now, if we'd have had more help doing that, which is what my institute does, these wars wouldn't be happening. They come from ignorance, people ignoring the interconnectedness that exists between them all. So that's my little preamble, really, and I send lamentations and grief and sorrow to all those who are being killed or their relatives being killed in these conflicts. I feel appalled that the intellectuals of the world are not doing more, that people are not speaking out enough, the UN isn't doing enough, the governments of the world are not doing enough. I know Macron has been trying here in France to send aid, and he's been trying to make Israel stick to international law and not bomb innocent civilians. And of course Israel says, well, yeah, but they're all in tunnels underneath. Well, that's not good enough. There has to be an inquiry into this. And in our World Intellectual Wisdom Forum, which met yesterday, our friend from Armenia, who's an international lawyer, made strongly the point that we have to stick to international law, folks. We can't just go around using force to solve problems. That was the big lesson at the end of World War II. That's why we founded the UN. That's why we founded UNESCO, and that's why we founded the International Court of Justice. There has to be a tension paid to actual legal processes. And America's partly to blame for this. It's been engaging in its own, ridiculous enterprises like attacking Iraq in 2003 without any international legality. And Britain, to my shame, has been a party to some of those. And this then created the image that, oh, well, if they can get away with it, so can we. Why don't we? So Russia thinks, well, to hell with it, America's doing what it wants, attacking weaker countries, so we'll just attack Ukraine. And then Israel thinks, well, look, they're all doing it, why can't we just, attack the Palestinians? And they were given a raison d'etre in the horrible attack of 7th October, and which was the most stupid and ridiculous thing that the Hamas people could have devised. It's blown back in their face 100 times. So here we are. We're in a catastrophic meltdown on the planet. We're suffering from a deficit of wisdom, and a surfeit of ignorance. I'm doing my bit here to flag up that philosophy is still the answer to these problems. I'm with Sartre. I'm with Camus. I'm with Jeremy Bentham. I'm with Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson. The philosophers of the world. We do actually have the answers to these problems, and it's time the statesmen started listening to us, and the religious leaders as well, who too often are not educated enough about other faiths. They may be very clever and skilled in their own tradition, but they're not learned in world faiths, which is what you've got to be now in this world. This is one global community, and I've been privileged to work at high level in interfaith peace diplomacy. And I've met some brilliant scholars and I would say living saints, Buddhists, Jains, Christians, Jews, Muslims, who are all appalled. We're all appalled at what's going on here. So that's my little preamble. Blessings, Happy New Year. Let's make it a better New Year. Let's solve these wars. Let's solve the Ukraine-Russia war. Let's stop the Israel-Hamas war, and let's stop all the other wars that have been going on. Like in Nigeria, some sort of pseudo-Muslim mobs have been attacking and killing Christians in their churches on Christmas Eve, killing dozens of them, just random sport. Now that's totally against Islam. A true Muslim is supposed to defend the honour of all Christians and actually all Jews, because they are one people. Muhammad himself said, I'm not bringing a new religion, I'm getting us back to the original religion, which is what the Jews and Christians have maybe strayed a little from. I'm bringing back the religion of Abraham, the pure unity religion that is there embedded in human hearts. That was what Muhammad thought. We should honour that, and which is why I've done my commentary on the Quran. But people that kill and slaughter in the name of that, they're not proper Muslims. They wouldn't be recognised as such by Muhammad or Aisha, who was in many ways Muhammad's spiritual mentor, as I've revealed in my commentary on the Quran. Aisha was a little bit, but no, I meant Khadija, his first wife, who was much more learned than dear old Aisha, who was very young when Muhammad married her. No, it's Khadija that was Muhammad's mentor in spiritual matters, as I've explained in my commentary. And she wouldn't recognise what's going on as Islam in that sort of mass killing spree. Or what was done on October the 7th, that wasn't Islamic. You don't kill innocent women and children in the name of Allah. As is revealed in the Tarot of the Gods, in the chapter on Allah, which I do strongly recommend people to get hold of and study. So without further ado, let's see what the gods have in store for us today. On this New Year's Day, it's Saint Sylvester's Day here in France. We honour Saint Sylvester, who was a pope in about 314 onwards AD, friend of Constantine, and great character. Right, so we're going to choose, I guess we'll choose a tarot each, and we'll look at what the gods have to say about what they can help. How can they help solve these human problems? That's the question before us. Okay.
Tengri.
Tengri, right. We'll come to you shortly, Mr. Tengri. Right.
Vishnu.
Oh, okay. Right. Two powerful gods today. Right. Well, yes. I mean, I can't say all gods are my favourites. These two are definitely my favourites because I love them all. The air suit is fascinating, and this deity is the page of air. He's called Tengri, and he's the god of the shamanic cultures of the Central Asian region, especially the Mongolians and all the people of like the vast reaches of Central Asia, and the early Turkish people and Mongolian, as well as other shamanic peoples of Central Asia and all the way into Siberia. Religious scholars, studied Tengri, and he's a fascinating deity. Genghis Khan, who founded the greatest empire the world had ever known, he worshipped Tengri, and so did all the Mongolians, until they later adopted Tibetan Buddhism as their extra add-on religion. There's a link between Tengrism and the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition. So the core deity of Tengrism is this heavenly father figure, Tengri, which is really just God, the word God in Turkish and Mongolian. He has a consort, the Earth Mother, Gaza, she's called. And this worship of the Father Sky, Tengri, and the Mother Earth is very simple, ancient, primal shamanism, and it seems to be the mother faith of all humanity. This is what the Druids worshipped in the ancient times. The American Indian tribes, all the pagan tribes of history essentially had this going. Tengri is represented by the sky, and the Chinese word is for, the way they draw it is sky in the Chinese. And the thinking of linguists is that all these languages, they all had a word for God and sky, which was Tengri. So how do you pray to Tengri? Well, you pray outdoors. These are very mountainous regions, so you pray up in the mountains. Or you might pray inside your yurt if it's really cold and snowing. You build a yurt. And so here we have a couple doing Tengri invocation with their shamanic drums, man and woman, and their yurts behind them and the mountain behind that. So this is just a symbolism. I think my reading of the world's problems is that we should be invoking these spiritual powers for help and aid, and not in the sense of my God's better than yours, so our people are going to conquer and destroy you. We're all under Tengri, we're all under the sky. There's no part of the earth you can travel and not look up and find the sky. Tengri is always there watching us, and therefore our actions should be extremely virtuous and ethical. Interestingly, the word tantra may come from the same root as tengri. It may mean that which is extended, stretched out, because the sky is stretched out in the heavens. Tantra is the study of the stretched outness behind everything. Every dharma, everything that is ultimately made of space, or tengri, which is pure space, through which the whole planet is moving. And tengri is the philosophical name, if you want, for the emptiness that is inside everything, which Buddhist metaphysicians later called the divine emptiness, shunyata, which is what is inside every form. So inside every form, like my body, I've got hands, body structure, in fact there's just emptiness here. All the atoms, they're whizzing about, they look like I'm real, and I am real, but I'm sort of relatively real. I'm illusory, and really I'm made of emptiness, as are we all. And that's the dharmic nature of a person. And that's my tengric nature. That's who I am in myself, in my true self. And I'd say that's true of every single Palestinian, every single Hebrew or Israeli, every single Ukrainian, every single Frenchman or Englishman or Russian. We're all descendants of Tengri. And we should wake up and remember that. And therefore cease killing and destroying. I mean, how stupid is that? Our womenfolk have gone to enormous trouble to give birth to each of us. It's very disrespectful to women, Mother Earth, to then kill the child that they've spent, 9 months bearing and then going through great pains to give birth to us and then feeding us with milk and so on. So it's much more respectful to honour each other. When you meet someone from another tribe in Mongolian Turkic culture, you honour them. They're welcome in your yurt. Everyone has the right to visit each other and you have to give them, shelter in your yurt. It's just the law of Tengri, because life is difficult enough. If we start going around killing each other, it's mad. Yes, Genghis Khan went on a bit of a crazy trip and he conquered lots of people, but he was eventually overcome by wisdom. And Tibetan Buddhists went to Mongolia and converted these people from being wild warriors who misused their powers to becoming wisdom people. I used to get Buddhists for Peace journals from Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia. I have a whole collection of them. There are now Mongolian Buddhist sages, working for the healing of humanity. And it's popular. Tengrism is recognized as a religion in Mongolia, in Kyrgyzstan, and in other Central Asian parts of the world. It's a huge thing. Somebody ought to write up an encyclopedia of Tengri studies. Nobody's yet done it, and I'm too busy. Interestingly enough, there was a time in the early communist Bolshevik era when there was a thought that intellectuals thought, why don't we combine the best bits of Tengrism and Vajrayana Buddhism with the best bits of communism? Why don't we have a kind of red Dharma that would stretch all across Asia? And Mongolia converted and became a communist state. And there were some Russian intellectuals, Sergei Borisov, Alexander Barshenko, and Gleb Boki, Boris Shumatsky, also Helena Rurik and Nicholas Rurik, Agvan Dorjiev, and others who said, let's have a sort of fusion of the best bits of Buddhism, the best bits of paganism, the best bits of communism, and let's make a sort of universal wisdom that we can all follow. Unfortunately, Stalin, who was ignorant and a power freak, didn't agree, and he killed them all off. He killed all the intellectuals calling for peace between Buddhism and communism, and he's identified them as a threat to security and had them shot. This is revealed in a very important book called Red Shambhala, which I strongly recommend to people, written by the historian Andrei Znamensky, which, Now when I pray, often I pray to Great Spirit. That's the American Indian word for Tengri. In my American Indian brothers and sisters, they're essentially worshipping Tengri, and we now know that the ancestors of the American Indians came from Asia, from Siberia, they crossed, over thousands of years, and peopled North America and South America. So they all came from the same people. When they worship Great Spirit, they're worshipping Tengri. It's the same thing, a different word. And that's what gives the American Indian religion its enormous humility, because we're all under spirit. So you smoke a peace pipe with your enemy and try and heal the problem. I could go in with a bunch of Tengri peace workers and American Indian peace workers, and we could smoke the peace pipe between Hamas and Israel. We could solve this in a week, as long as there's a ceasefire and we can actually talk to the people in charge, the chiefs. The same with Russia and Ukraine. These people have to smoke the peace pipe in the light of Great Spirit and solve their problems. So this is the page of air. He wields the power of air as the page You know, he's a really powerful god, Tengri, and he wants peace now. So that's enough of that. Thank you very much. That's Tengri. Thanks. Great card. I love him. Now we come to this one, which is a major arcana. So he's not just an air, fire, water suit. He's one of the big gods, and he's Vishnu. Ha! Now Vishnu is really, we wouldn't be here without Vishnu, because Vishnu is the Indian way of talking about the sustainer god, who sustains everything and keeps everything here in balance. In a sense, Tengri is like Brahma. He's the pure spirit who creates everything. We can't see him. He doesn't have a face. But but what we need is a deity that we can relate to on a human level, who has avatars, incarnations, and who cares enough for this planet to come into form and become an avatar here. And of course, we all know some of the great avatars of Vishnu. Can anyone name an avatar of Vishnu? Krishna, right. So we all know Krishna is a famous avatar, and he's the key figure of the Mahabharata, which is one of the great epics of world literature and religion, and particularly the sequence called the Bhagavad Gita, where he gives very detailed metaphysical instructions about yoga and, you know, what to do when you're in incarnation, how you're supposed to behave, what is Dharma, what is truth. Because you might say, well, my home's with Tengri, great spirits, so I'm not going to get involved in politics. I won't I'm certainly not going to fight in wars and stuff. Well, Krishna points out that, yes, there are two levels. There's absolute truth, where everything is made of emptiness and we're all one. But then there's the visible world of individuated souls in incarnation, different nations, different cultures and religions, and we have to play the game. I mean, I happen to be born English, right? So I speak the language. I was born into that tradition and culture, and I'm not ashamed of that. You know, I try and work with the best aspects of that. I've been educated to a high level in England. It's my duty, therefore, to represent that culture in its best light, and then to try and educate my English confreres who are misusing the label of English and misbehaving and doing things like Brexit and arms deals and just really running amok on the planet, you know. So Krishna taught all this about Dharma, how we should act. But he's only one of many incarnations of Vishnu. Rama was another who did the same, even earlier. And that's in the amazing Ramayana by Valmiki, which is a great epic poem in its own right. And it's said that Vyasa was also an incarnation of Vishnu. He was the compiler of the Vedas, like, you know, the Rig Veda and all the others, and he was a seer who wrote them all down from pure spirit. Well, some will say there isn't such a person as just one Vyasa. Okay, there's a sequence of them. It means a compiler, a sage. There are other incarnations. Balarama, who's the lord of agriculture, is also a very important deity. He's known sometimes as the elder brother of Krishna, and he appears in some of the Krishna stories in the Mahabharata. And Buddha himself is said to be an incarnation of Vishnu. I can accept that. And Vishnu is worshipped and understood, his importance in Buddhist circles. I suspend judgment on the mystery of which deity is incarnated in which sage. Some people say Vishnu incarnated into Buddha. Others say Indra incarnated as Buddha. I suspend judgment. I'll ask when I get there and we interview each other. What I do know is the final avatar is going to be called Kalki, and we're waiting for him, and I think it's time he showed up. I've always liked this story ever since I first heard it, and Kalki appears when the world is in absolute turmoil and despair. Well, I think it's time he showed up. I think it's time for Kalki. And for that reason, I've written a film script about Kalki's reappearance. which is currently with some potential producers. Because I think the Kalki experience that we need as humanity should be a shared thing. Just as Krishnamurti refused to be Maitreya, he said, no, there's not just one Maitreya, it's not just me, it's all of us. I'm saying it's not just one Kalki can do this, it's all of us. And my film script makes that plain. It's a joint Hollywood-Bollywood production. And it ends happily, I'll just say that. And in my script, all the avatars of Vishnu all come back now at once. And they all tackle the problems that they're good at. For instance, Prithu, who was an early incarnation of Vishnu, he solves the problems of agriculture, soil depletion, because he invented agriculture. Matsya, who was a whale, he solves the problems of our oceans because the oceans are getting polluted, the fish are dying. So Matsya comes back and solves that. And Mohini, who takes a female form, Vishnu took a female form as Mohini, a beautiful enchantress. Well, she comes back and solves the problem for women being oppressed all over the planet, raped, etc., etc., and so on. So that's my proposal, which I put into a film. And also Kapila is supposed to be an incarnation of Vishnu, who was a very great yogi, the founder of the Samkhya school of philosophy and yoga. And that's where Buddha grew up, in Kapilavatthu, in Nepal. And so he modelled himself on Kapila, which is Vishnu. So you can say, okay, so that's the sense in which Buddha is an incarnation of Vishnu. Anyway, if you're interested in the details of Vishnu, and they're profound, read my book, which is, I'll go into them all, they're all there. The point of this card, I think, is that Vishnu is trying to help us, and I know many peace workers on the planet right now that are working to stop these wars. I wish there were more of us. I wish we were more able to access the mass media. I wish our voices carried more weight than, why is it that the warmongers, like the kind of people asking for war and death, people like Netanyahu have all the media time and the peace voices don't? Why does Putin have access to the world's media and not the peace people of Russia? A woman tried to stand against Putin and was stripped of her rights to do that because it's a corrupt system. So that's something that Vishnu is working on, I'm sure. So, yes. So these two together, they're a powerful team, I'd say. Tengri and Vishnu. And it's good to have them on our side, on the side of peace. And long may that hold. Okay, any comments or questions about these two?
What about Shiva in the chaos period?
What about Shiva?
In chaos period, Vishnu is like the quiet years of growing economy and people expanding.
Yeah.
And well, is there another stage, another area after this area? A new area with no money, no different way to relate each other, or
That's a good question. Yeah.
a new world can it come smoothly from the ancient world? I don't know.
Okay, so that's a good question. What I'm hearing from the question is, so Vishnu stands for order, peace, harmony. But then what about Shiva? Surely he stands for chaos and transformation, and sometimes that's difficult and bumpy. Like when a plane's landing, it can be very bumpy sometimes. And there's a phase transition, as we call it. And so civilizations go through these phase transitions, which are chaotic and destructive. And is violence not a part of that? Should we accept that? Like when we die, our body dies and our cells die, and that seems to be inbuilt into the life process. Death is part of it. So why should we lament war? Because, hey, it's just nature doing this thing, it's killing people off, and they're going to die anyway. Okay, so one can make that argument, and Darwinian types make that argument, and that sort of argument has been used to justify war. I think that argument is outdated. Myself, I think that that I'm not saying death. There's something wrong with death caused naturally through illness, old age, and so on. What I'm against is involuntary forced death of other people. It should be their choice. The problem with these wars and using mass weapons of destruction is that it's killing young, innocent children, babies, mothers and civilians who have chosen life. And to then shoot them or bomb them or kill them or send a missile is very offensive to Dharma, to cosmic law. And it offends Shiva as well, in my opinion. And we didn't draw Shiva this time, but if you do, and you read my card of Shiva, Shiva is a yogi who believes in transcendental transformation. He doesn't want torture, mass killing, secret bases where they torture people. And violence is the last resort of absolute fools. A true yogi is sworn to non-violence. They'll never use violence because being clairvoyant, they know the answer anyway. Why torture someone to say, where's the gold hidden? They already know, right? Because they've purified themselves. They've purified their own consciousness, so it's blended with the divine consciousness, Tengri or Vishnu or whatever you want to call it. And so they don't need to inflict violence on other people because they are one with that other person's soul. When your soul or ego surrenders to the absolute, then you blend with all other beings because we're all interconnected. And that's why it's said in the wisdom teachings of Shiva that you cannot even begin to study yoga unless you take an oath of non-violence, ahimsa. That's the first thing you do before you even get in the door. It's the same with the philosophy club. Because otherwise you're going to misapply the knowledge. You'll use it for military intelligence. You'll use it for, spies and torture and all that game. Now that's not the way of light. Neither that would Vishnu agree with that, nor Shiva. Shiva's about you do tapas. You prove that you're immune to heat, cold, suffering, starvation. You do fasting. To prove that you can see into the spiritual kingdom, spiritual world, and you realise that we're all made of Tengri, so why should I harm you? And that's why Shiva brought us tantric lovemaking as well. That transcendental fusion with the soul of your consort is seeing through the game of otherness to the core, and that's what Shiva approves of. Instead of killing another, like dropping bombs on beautiful women and their children. I mean, that's so against cosmic law. It's just shocking. They should be on their knees apologising, people that are doing this. Shiva's totally against violence like that. So anyway, that would be my response to that. But thanks for mentioning Shiva. He always likes to show up when Vishnu's around. Yeah. Okay. Right, now we're going to do something very exciting. So we've got our two deities. Now we're going to look at our runes for the day. And because it's New Year's Eve, magical time, I thought we'd introduce the runes into the conversation because for those that aren't familiar with the runes, I was never taught about the runes growing up. They weren't mentioned by my religious studies teachers. My parents knew nothing about them. It was sort of forgotten knowledge, lost knowledge. I mean, as a child, I read The Lord of the Rings, and I loved it. And I think that's probably where I first ever read about the runes, because they appear in The Lord of the Rings. They do, because Tolkien was a professor of Anglo-Saxon.